In this tutorial, we're going to have a look at how you can structure and organize your photos library so that you can find things easier. Now, let's start with what Apple gives us by default. You can see your library section here on the top left, and all these albums listed here, starting with photos, memories, and so on, they are created by Apple. We can't change that. We cannot change any settings or criteria. So for example, as soon as we favor a photo, it will jump into that album favorites. If you don't have any favorites at all, you will not see that album in your library. Now, Apple also has other albums that are there by default and happen automatically. When you go down to your album section, you can see a folder called Media Types. And when you open that, it will give you all the different media types that you will have in your library. So this might look different in your library because maybe you don't have live photos, so this will not be there. Only if you use the media type, it will show up and pop up in this album. Now again, we can't change anything about that. It all happens automatically and the criteria is set. We can't access that or change it. If you're using the Apple ecosystem and iCloud Photos library, you will see all these albums as well on your iPhone or tablet. So let's see what we can do ourselves to organize and structure our photos library. We have three options. We can create albums, smart albums, or folders. Now let me explain first what these three things are. Folders simply hold albums. You cannot add a photo directly to a folder. They're just a container for albums, and they can hold multiple albums and smart albums. Now, albums, this is what you will use most of the time. This is simply a container for your photos. And remember, this is only a virtual album. So when you add a photo to an album, it is not being copied or duplicated. It's like a link to your master file. That's all there is. That also means, and that's the reason why if you delete a photo from your library, it will also be removed from the album because it's not a copy. Now, as I mentioned, an album sits in a folder and multiple albums can sit in one folder. Next is smart albums. They're a bit different. You can use them to display photos automatically based on criteria that you specify. So for example, if you want to do yearbooks, you could have smart albums, one per year. So let's say 2020, that's the first criteria. The photo has to be taken in 2020 and the photo has to be a favorite. And if these two conditions are fulfilled, it will show up in that smart album. And at the end of the year, you've got all your best photos of that year collated, and you can create a book or another project or whatever, and you've got them there. And these can be prepared, and as you go, photos will automatically be added to the smart album based on these conditions. Let's have a look how to create a folder. So just simply click on that plus sign here, choose folder, and it will add a folder at the bottom of the list. You name it, return, and you've got your folder. Now this is empty and I can move it around as I want. So I want that on top. Here we go. Next up, I want to create an album. Now if I'm standing on that folder and create the album from here, it will automatically be put in that folder. So let's do that. Album. There we go. My test album. How do I get photos into that album? There's different ways. So if I'm in my photo stream here, I simply select the photos I want in the album and I drag them into the album. Now you can see how this has changed and it's not empty anymore. And I've got these 15 photos in the album. Remember, this is only a link to the original. If I go now and delete that photo, first of all, it's now here in recently deleted, and when I have a look at my album, it's gone too. So always remember that. The other way around, if you delete this photo here and simply click delete, it is still in the library. Here it is, because it has only been removed. If you're in doubt, use the right mouse click, so control click, and remove the photo from the album. That doesn't delete it. That's the safer way to do it. Now, if you're in Photos and you want to create an album with these photos here, what you can also do is then right click, add to, and then you can either add them to an existing album or create a new album. Let's make a new one. Photos 2. Now I've got the album here. This is another way how you can do an album. And as you go, and when you've got your existing albums, you can always simply, drag photos over to whichever album you want, and it can be in multiple albums. This is how you create an album. Now, how to create a smart album so that things can happen automatically. Again, we're going, this is my parent folder. I want it to be sitting straight in that folder. So plus smart album. And now I get some choices here. Smart album. Now what I want photos that is not a favorite. You see how that changed to 1900, but I want more. I want photos that are not a favorite and that was taken after December. You can also just type in, there we go. Sorry. So I want photos that are not a favorite and that have been captured in 2020. Apparently I've got 353 of these. This is also an important choice here. You can either match all of these conditions or any. So I want all. I want them to be not a favorite and 2020. Okay, and now it's added my smart album, and you see this 300 photos here. And as soon as I change things now, so when I go through my library and I decide, this is a favorite, it's immediately removed from that smart album, and it will also be now in the favorite photos instead. Now that you've got your albums and smart albums and folders created, it's time to adjust the structure a bit sometimes. So what you might want to do is you might want to create a folder and add albums into that folder and move them around by dragging and dropping. Very easy. If you have imported a folder structure from outside of Photos, what it then does is it actually imports the folder plus it creates an album like this. So if that was a big structure, it's a bit of a nuisance because you've got all these folders and albums, and you don't need the folders, all you need is the albums. So what you've got to do is you go and grab the albums and you move them out of your folder structure, out of your subfolders like this. And then you will end up with a lot of empty albums and folders which we don't need. So unfortunately there is no way that you can select the first and shift click on the last. You see how it jumps? It doesn't work. You have to go to the parent folder, and that will show you all the empty albums here. So now you can select multiple, and you can either command delete or right click and delete 4 folders, and it will give you a warning again. If you do that, photos that might still be in these folders or albums are not going to be deleted. It's only the folders and the albums. Delete, and they're gone. Here we go. Now I'll close that folder. This is all over the shop now. I like things to be sorted. So what you can do is you right click, you sort. I want them by name. There we go. Now they're by name. And you know, when you add albums now and folders, they will be added to the bottom, or depending on where you're standing, so it might mess up the structure or the sorting again, and you simply resort. That's all. I'm going to show you a couple of little tricks. So when you hover your mouse over an album, you can actually see the content without going into the album. And if you're not happy with the first photo that's shown here, the keyframe, you can double click and enter that album and go and choose, let's say, take that one, choose your photo, right click, make key photo, and when you then go back, this is your key photo. That's the first one that you see when you look at this view. You can also merge albums. So let's say I want to merge these two albums. I simply drag that over to here, let it go, and merge. So you might have noticed that it has jumped from 13 to 14 rather than 15 photos, because we had an album here with 13 photos. Let me undo that. There we go. We've got 13 photos and we've got 2 photos. So that's 15. When I drag that over and merge, I end up with 14. That's because one of the photos was in both albums. So it merges them, it doesn't duplicate anything, and you see the same photo only once.